So today's concept is the Queen's Gambit for White. Tomorrow is the calculation mastery. So the Queen's Gambit is one of the most popular openings in chess. It's not really a gambit because you will get the pawn back after a few moves if black decides to accept it. So yeah, the Queen's Gambit occurs after d4, d5, and c4. And black of course can play knight f6 here and also many other lines, but we're gonna maybe cover those in part 2. Let's just get to the main moves. d5, c4. Black has quite decent options here. Main move is e6. The Queen's Gambit declined, also the most played move. d takes c4 is the Queen's Gambit accepted, which is not dangerous for us at all. c6 is the Slav defense, which we're gonna check it out. And c5 is not good. Knight c6 is a cheat with e6. We're gonna play knight c3 here. Of course, knight f3 is the Catalan, which we have seen in our last course. Knight c3, and here black again has a few options. d takes c4 doesn't really work because here we can play easily e4 and get the pawn back. Like there is no other way. There is no way to defend it. If b5 we can just take and have a winning position already. So knight c3. Main move is knight f6, but there are a few moves that became fashionable in the recent years. Of course, c5, the Tarrasch defense is a really old line. It's really popular for a draw. And the moves that became trendy are a6 and bishop e7. The point is, when we play a6, we delay knight f6, so white wouldn't play bishop g5 and place his bishop onto the least active square, which is a 4, but it causes no problem for us at all. So let's start with bishop e7. Bishop e7 have the same idea of g5, stopping us from playing bishop g5, but we don't fear it. We're gonna just take. Almost in all of the lines we're gonna take on d5, e5, and bishop f4. Let's say knight f6. It kind of transposes. The move order doesn't really matter. e3, because we can do whatever we want. Let's say bishop f5, but here the move order makes a little change, because if black plays bishop f5 now, we have queen b3. And if knight c6 comes, we can play g4, the great move. Of course, you can play a3 if you want a passive game, a really solid game. g4, bishop c8 doesn't work, because we have h3, and this is not a weakness, because we can develop the bishop to g2 and put pressure on d5, and you can see well that the c6 knight is pretty much misplaced. Let's say he takes on g4, we take on b7, knight b4, threatening knight c7, we're going to play rook c1, defending it, as c7 pawn is going to be lost. Bishop f5, bishop 7, queen c8 takes, bishop e5, a really favorable endgame for white. We are up a pawn, and the d5 pawn is also a disaster. Let's say knight g4, and we're going to take on d5 now. We have traded a g pawn for a d pawn, which is of course better for us, and also we have unlocked the g2 square for our bishop, which is also great for us. Knight g4, we're going to take on d5. If queen c8, avoiding the exchange, which makes sense, we have this really great maneuver, queen to g2. We are threatening h3, taking on g7, and the knight have some trouble, so castle comes and e4. We get the center now. Let's say bishop g6. We're gonna do a long castle, and this position is kind of crazy, I know. But white is really way better, because we have the g file and we have h4, h5s coming soon. So yeah, that was queen c8. Let's say queen d5, knight d5, bishop e4. We're gonna just take and play rook c1 and everything is defended. c6, a3, knight d5, h3, knight gf6, bishop e5. This is, you have the bishop there. This is practical game now. You don't need to memorize this. So that was this line. Yeah, that's bishop f5 now. So castle, let's say. We're gonna play bishop d3, c5. And yeah, so as you can see, the main move here is c6, and you can tell if black plays knight f6, e3, and castles, he doesn't want to play c6 anymore, and he probably wants to go c5. But it's very fine for white. We can just play knight g2, knight c6, we castle. If cd4, knight d4, knight d4, ed4, and let's say bishop d7, we can put the bishop in the more active square and rook e1, knight d7, queen c2, attacking the h7 pawn. So g6, we're gonna play bishop c7, a really nice tactic, forcing black to exchange his dark square bishop, which was his better bishop. So, but here it's an exception. We have knight d5 too, and we're gonna take on e7 and be off a pawn. But this idea is, you gotta remember this move. It happen a lot in these structures. Well, here we have knight d5, but let's say we didn't have knight d5 and rook e7. This is also better for white. So cd4 doesn't make sense. He gotta keep the pressure on our center. c4 is a move that many players will play. We're gonna just move the bishop back to b1 all the way. Why not c2? Because it will be attacked by the knights jumping to b4, and we would like the rook to stay on this a file, playing b3 soon. And after take, we're gonna take and have the a file. Let's say a6, b3, b5, takes, and e4, breaking the center now. Bishop e6, e5, knight h5, queen c2, g6. We don't want to lose the bishop there. Bishop h6, rook e8, and queen d2, f5. If he didn't play f5, we would have played f4. So yeah, he's kind of. This is also a practical game, and white is much better. So yep, c4 is not a good idea. Bishop e6, we can just take on c5 and takes and rook c1, and we're gonna play knight b5 and knight d4. Yeah. In our next courses, which will be the middle game masterclass after the calculation, we will be talking about these a lot, using the weaknesses on our opponent's position. a6, of course, the main line. We're gonna take on c5, bishop c5, and rook c1. Same thing here. Let's say they go bishop e7. We can play bishop e1, and our usual plan, bringing the knight to f5 and take, getting the bishop and a much better position for white. This idea is not really great, so let's look at c6. e3. If bishop f5 here, you don't have to play queen b3. We have an instant g4 now, and after bishop g6, we have h4. He cannot, of course, take because we have queen b3, and if b6, we have rook h4. Great technical idea. I'll let you guys think for some seconds and try to calculate what white's next move. It's kind of obvious, but yeah.
Knight d5.
What? Can you repeat that again?
Knight d5.
Yeah, of course. Knight takes d5. We're gonna take on d5. If he doesn't take on c5, we have knight c7, and white is much better. cd5, bishop b5. That's a key move. You can also take on d5. White will be still better, but yeah, this is just way more simple, and black is almost made it. That's just, the game is over here. So it doesn't really work. He cannot take on h4. Let's say h5 makes the most sense. g5, bishop d6. We're gonna play knight e2, replacing that bishop's place with our knight. Takes on knight f4, and this is, and if you look at the h5 pawn, you'll notice that it's also a weakness. So knight e2. Again, we don't want him to take on our f4 knight and ruin our structure, so we play knight e2 to recapture with the knight, and that's just a decent position for white. Look at the h5 pawn, look at the bishop on g6. So let's say h6 real quick. We're gonna play h5, bishop h7, and bishop d3. Knight f6, we're gonna play f3, defending the g4 pawn. Bishop d6, we're gonna play knight e2. Takes, we're gonna take with the e pawn. You can take with the knight, there is no problem. But I prefer taking with the e, and king f2, and white's position is really great. We are having g5 soon. So yeah, bishop f5 is, and you gotta play bishop e6 now. h3, defending that pawn. I already told you guys that this is not a weakness, it's actually an advantage. If h5, we're gonna take, and that's almost kind of a free pawn, because knight df6, and you can't really use it. If knight f6, I think we have h6 ideas. Yeah, we have h6, and black's structure is much worse than us. Even though we have also an f and h pawn, but his pieces cannot really use them as a weakness. So yeah, let's say knight f6, knight f3, castle, bishop d3, c5. Well, he has nothing else to do. He has to break the center, but we're gonna just play king f1. Why not castle? Because we want to keep the rook on the h file. That's obvious. King g2, and let's say cd4, knight d4, knight d4, and you have great attacking chances. Yeah, I love white's position. And almost I can tell that no one will play bishop f5. Bishop d6 is not good. We can just take and have an easy position. I'll just show you some moves. We're gonna play h3, g4, and long castle, and attack, and attack. Knight f4, g5, h4, h5s. This is decent. Like knight f6, of course. We're gonna play bishop d3. At bd7, we're gonna play h3. We don't want to fall into knight h5s, of course. Castle, knight f3. The knight is not going on e2, guys. Please remember that. The knight is going to f3 in these structures. There was a position where black played c5 and we played knight e2. Well, of course, that was different. So knight f3, because we wanna jump into e5. Rook e8, castle, knight f8, queen c2. Black has different plans. Let's say knight e6. Sorry. Bishop e5, g6, and rook b1. This is the main plan in the Carlos spot structure I have explained already in our Caracan course about. So knight g7, and we're gonna play b4, a6, a4, bishop f5, b5. We don't care. Queen d3 takes. Great, lovely position for white. c6 pawn is going to be a permanent weakness. Knight h5, another idea. g6, rook b1, a5, not letting us to play b4. We're gonna play a3, b4 takes, and we still make c6 a weakness. He can't do anything about it. Bishop d6, I don't like this move for black. Why would you waste a tempo on the bishop? We can just take and play rook b1, no problem. We can go knight e5 too. So yeah, let's say knight g6, main idea. Bishop h2, bishop d6. Well, it's different now. Why? Because when he plays knight g6, we have wasted a tempo with the bishop, and he have used a tempo. So now he can play bishop d6. We can take happily, and when he takes, we can play rook b1. Our usual plan, he cannot stop us. If a5, a3, let's say knight e7, knight f4, knight c5, everything is great for white. Let's say queen e7, we can play b4, a6 and a4, knight e4, bishop e4. Have that in mind. When knight e4 comes, we mostly take the bishop. We don't want that knight to be super dangerous. And great position for white. I love white's position. Yep. Let's say queen g5, we can play knight g3 and trade the queens happily. So that was that was the bishop e7 line. That's a whole main line. So analyze that carefully. Let's have a look at bishop b4, another sideline.
Excuse me, with your move
Yeah.
order, do we also need to, do we also face Manhattan variation?
What is Manhattan? Can you say it in move orders?
Yeah, d4,
Sorry.
d5,
Okay.
c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, knight bd7, e3, bishop b4.
Oh no, we're gonna just after knight f6, we're gonna just take on d5. Why would we give black extra options? Yeah, we
Oh,
also
okay.
avoid the chamber spring and then play bishop g5.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. So let's look at bishop b4. We can just take on d5, e d5, and play bishop f4. Nothing wrong with white's position. This is way weaker than the Ragozin. The Ragozin, if you don't know, is knight f6, knight f3, and bishop b4. This is way different. Because the f3 knight, well, we didn't play knight f3, so we have an extra tempo saved. So bishop b4, cd5, bishop f4, knight e7. We can play queen f4 after knight c6, play e3. Black doesn't have the annoying option of knight e4, so that's in our favor. Let's say knight f6, e3, castle. Knight e4 now, we'll be faced with queen a4, knight c6, bishop b5. If bishop c3 we can take, knight c3 of course doesn't work, we can take on c6 and we will win a piece. So if castle we can play knight e2 and we have the bishop there. a5, we can play knight e2, defending that knight. Castle, and white's position is great, no problems. Black can hold, like it's minus something like 0.70 or something, I don't know. But white's definitely better and easier to play. Well, c5, we can play bishop d3, doesn't make sense. Knight c6, knight e2, castle. We can just castle, man. Absolute fine position for white. If c6, we can play bishop d3, bishop g4, knight e2, castle, queen b3. The bishop is misplaced on b4. Yeah, what the hell is it doing on b4? It has to be on e7 or d6. So, yep, it doesn't transpose to those lines. Castle, we can play bishop d3, c5. Knight e2, knight c6, castle, we transpose to the c5 line we have seen. cd4, we can take the e pawn, and if bishop g4, we can play f3. Bishop h5, a3, bishop e7, rook c1, using the c file, of course. If bishop g6, knight f4, b4, gaining space, and we have knight g3 and knight f4. Sorry, knight g3 and knight f5 coming soon. Yep. Bishop b4 is not good. And let's see two more sidelines. c5. The Tarrasch defense, which is quite popular. You will face it in at least 20% of your games. You're gonna take on d5. Well, of course you're gonna take on d5. cd4 is just not good. We can play queen a4, bishop d7, and take on d4, and we're just up a pawn, and black doesn't really have any compensations for that. Of course, e5, knight f3. cd4 doesn't also make sense. We can play knight d4, and we have an happy position, g3, bishop g2, castle. Everything's fine. So c4 is not good now. We can play e4, takes, and play knight g5. Knight f6, bishop c4. Black is facing some serious problems now. So c4 is too early. Knight c6 is the most played move. Knight f6. Trust me, everyone gonna play knight c6, and mostly it will transpose. So let's go with knight c6. But we have the interesting option of playing d takes c5. Of course, you can play g3. I also play g3 a lot. Great position for white. White has no problems at all. Great position. You can check this out. But we're gonna play dc5. Then if knight f6, it doesn't really work because we can't play bishop e3 and we don't let black to play d4 anymore. So yeah, bishop e7, we're gonna play g3, castle, bishop g2, bishop g4, we're gonna play knight d4. Another great position for white. So knight c6, dc5, d4 of course. Knight a4. Knight e4 is a mistake because there's queen d5. And our advantage is gone. You can play knight d6 and get to this position, but it's equal, I believe. Yeah, it's equal. Black is too active now. Knight a4. If bishop c5, knight c5, queen a5, you can play bishop d2, takes, and rook c1. And queen b6, we're gonna play e3. Of course, getting rid of that. Alright, guys, give me a moment. Sorry, my sister came in. Alright, I'm back. So e3, getting rid of that strong pawn, knight f6. If d3, take and trying to win a pawn, it doesn't really work because that pawn doesn't really matter, and black's structure is ruined. So let's say knight f6, bishop c4, d takes c3. And knight f6, bishop c4, d takes c3, bishop e3, queen b4, we're gonna play bishop d2. Queen takes on b2 is not good because I think we can just castle, and after castle, I think we have rook c2, and black's queen is really struggling, and I think we have bishop c5 now. Yeah, great move. Queen c5 is met with bishop f7, and black will lose his queens. So that doesn't work. Queen b4, bishop d2, queen e7, bishop e2. Our bishops are retreated. Castle, castle, rook d8. We're gonna play rook e1. We have the bishop pair, and the position is open. So white is of course better. We just lost the bishop pair, but we transformed the bishop pair into an permanent weakness for black. So we didn't lose our advantage. Bishop f5, queen c6, great position for white. I don't want to really get deep into sidelines which you won't face anytime in your lifetime. Bishop g4 is well met with a3, bishop e7, h3. Of course, he should not take because our bishop will be opened. Bishop h5, b4, knight f6, g4, bishop g6, bishop g2, h5, g5, knight e4. We can just play castle. Castle, and we can play bishop b2. Black's position is really sad. Like, yeah, we kept the c5 pawn, and he really couldn't take it back. So, yeah, that doesn't work. Let's say bishop f5. Same idea. We're gonna play e3. Not really same idea. Sorry, because at that time we played a3. But a3 is also fine now, but I prefer e3, d3, and a3 now. Knight f6, b4, keeping that pawn, queen d5, knight c3. Queen to c2, we're gonna play bishop b2, and what the hell is the queen on c4 doing? And the d3 pawn is a weakness, and we're already up a pawn. So b5, the main move. We're gonna just take, and play e3. You gotta be careful here, guys. Listen carefully. Bishop b4, we're gonna play bishop d2, bishop d7, bishop b5. If rook f5 comes, we can take on d4, knight d4, bishop b4, knight b5 takes, and we can play knight c5. It's two pieces for a rook and 2 pawns, but white is almost winning here, because look at this position. The a5 pawn is a weakness, our rooks are more active. lovely position for white. So yeah, that was the line that we checked. White is perfect. And we have a passed a pawn, and you can check out the game. That was the Tarrasch. One more sideline, and we're up to the main line. A6. We're gonna take on d5 as usual. Takes and bishop f4. So any move that you faced here, we take on d5 basically. That's you gotta remember. Even bishop b4, yeah. a6, cd5, bd5, bishop f4. We cannot go bishop g5. So knight f6, e3, bishop d6. We're gonna just simply take and play bishop d3, knight c6, knight d2, castle a3, knight d7, queen c2. The idea is to play bishop f5, but we won't let that happen. And white's position is lovely. We have b4 plans, knight a4, knight c5 plans, knight g3, knight f5, and f3, e4 is the main. Even h3, g4 sometimes. That was a6. All of the sidelines are covered now. Knight f6. Also c6 is a note boom. No, not the note. It's the triangle Slav. We can just play e3, but also you can take on d5 and play bishop f4. That's also fine and do our usual development. But black has bishop d6. That's why I recommend playing e3, which I'll show later. So those were the sidelines. Any questions, guys? Any questions? Alright. Wait, can you all open your voice if you have any questions? Because I don't know. You know what? If you have any questions, just write down in the comments of the last message on the channel if you can't open your voice. Yeah. Wait, do you have a question? Arka? Okay, let's just continue. CD5. Knight f3 is also the old main line. But yeah, we're gonna just not look at that. Let's not confuse ourselves. CD5, ED5 of course. Knight e5 is, you can just play e4. I don't want to go deep in this line. That's the semi-Tarrasch. You can have easy playing. You can check some Grandmaster games and be fine. ED5, of course, the main move. And bishop at g5 now. If bishop e7, e3, bishop d3, knight bd7, queen c2, knight f3, avoiding c6. It just transposes, kind of, I think. Let me see. Yeah, it just transposes. Let's see c6 first, e3, and now. A really popular line is bishop f5. Used to play for draws. We're gonna play queen f3. Bishop g6. We're gonna take on f6. Gf6 doesn't make any sense. We're gonna just play h4. Have a lovely position. Queen f6, gf6, and knight f3. Knight d7. We're gonna play knight h4. g3, f3, long castle, king f2. The idea is to play bishop f3, bishop h3, and bishop f5, and white's lovely. Yeah, I love white's position. This bishop is dead. Or even knight f5, sorry. And also a5, h4, b4, e4. White has many ideas. That's the exchange variation. I don't know what it's called, but whatever. If h6, bishop h4, and now bishop f5, we're gonna still play queen f3. If bishop g6, same thing, but the pawn on h6 is even worse. If queen b6, queen f5, queen b2, queen c8, and king e7, we're gonna play rook b1, and this, I think, a winning position for white. Knight d4, knight f3, bishop g7, rook b7, and knight h4, gh4, queen e6. This is beautiful. I should have made it a puzzle, but After f6, there's rook g7 and king h5 is well met by bishop e2. If queen f, king f5, there's g4 and g3 and bishop h3. This is really beautiful. So yeah, that's really nice. Wow. So yeah. Let's see, knight d7. We're gonna play bishop d3 and bishop d6. We're gonna play queen c2. If knight f8, we can remember, guys. Let me tell you one main key point. Anytime black plays knight f8 before castling, and we have the queen on c2 and bishop on d3, we long castle. Remember that, and it's in
Where
white's
we
favor.
will begin the giveaway.
What? Sorry. Your
When
voice.
we will begin the giveaway.
Can you write that, please? Your voice
When
is
we
lagging.
will begin the giveaway.
When we
The
will.
giveaway.
The giveaway. After the end of the class, I'll choose 3 active persons. Yeah. So knight f8, castle, knight g6, knight e2, h6, and bishop f6, e4. We break the center. So h6 comes, bishop h4, castle, knight f3, rook e8, castle, short, knight f8, rook a, e1, bishop g4, knight d2, and our idea is, of course, e4. Let's say bishop e7. Let's say, yeah, bishop e7 makes sense. And f4, attacking on the king side. Knight f3. h3 is an interesting idea. That bishop is dead on h7. So yeah, we can check out this game. We break the center now, and great position for white. So that was what will happen mostly. Bishop e7, main move. We're gonna play bishop d3. Knight b d7, knight f3. If knight e4, planning a quick exchange, we will ignore it and play bishop f4. f5, we can play castle, castle h3, rook e8 and queen c2, knight f8, and we can play knight f5, knight e5, sorry, and play f3 soon. Knight g5, we can play h3, a5 takes, and bishop h2. We don't want to trade our strong bishop. Bishop e7, castle, knight h5 is also an idea. We can take on e7. Yep. Queen e7 and castle. If g6, we can play rook b1, castle b4, a6, a4. Knight f6, queen c2, rook e8, and rook f1. Great position for white. Let's say castle, queen b1, interesting idea. Knight f6, b4, rook e8, and rook c1. Also playing b5 and a4s. So bishop e7, e3, castle, bishop d3, now b7, queen c2, rook e8, knight f3, c6, and here. This is the main position of the queen's gambit declined. We're gonna play h3. A really calm and waiting move, which I like a lot. You can also play rook a b1. You can play knight e5. Everything's fine here. Like you can play rook a b1, no problem for white. I want to play h3. Black has thousands of lines to play. One of them is h6, bishop f4, and bishop d6, but we're gonna play knight e5. Knight e6, bishop g3, and we're gonna play f4 a5s. Let's say knight e4. Again, we're gonna ignore the trade. Knight e5, we're gonna take. This time we took with the bishop. You may ask why. Why didn't we take with the knight? Well, in this position, I believe that the knight will do a more useful job than the bishop, because this bishop is always bad, and we're gonna play knight e5 and f4 a5. Of course, we can take also with the knight, and Bishop h2. Engine also prefers this. You can play that. So yep, 94. Bishop f4 takes and play b4, a6 and a4. Bishop e7, b5. You go for a quick before b5, e4, and c6 pawn is a weakness. 94 doesn't really work. Bishop e6 is a idea. We're gonna play 95. 97, bishop e7, rook e7, f4, f6. We bring back the knight, knight b6, and rook a1. Queen c7, rook e2, bishop e7, rook e1, rook a8, f5. Great position for white. This is amazing in rapid and blitz. Also great in standard. It's overall great for white. This type of positions. That's bishop e6. Let's see. Bishop knight g6 2. We're gonna take on f6, takes, and b4. After a6, we're gonna play a4. Bishop e7. We're gonna play b5, takes, and yeah, we're gonna use the c5 square and have a great position. One more line, and we're done. Is g6. Bishop d6 is met with rook e1, bishop d7, e4 takes, and knight c5. We have great attack, takes, and there's a great game between Magnus Carlsen and Richard Rapport. I suggest you to check it out. In the World Championship this year or last year, I think, 2023. So whatever. Knight g6, we're gonna take, and play b4, as we have seen. g6, another idea. Rook b1, knight d6. If a5, we can play a3, knight d6, bishop h4, knight g7, b4 comes, takes, bishop f5, takes, and b5. c6 pawn will be, as always, a weakness. Knight d6, bishop h4, knight g7, b4, a6, a4. If knight f5, we can take on f6. That bishop is no longer strong, so we have no problem by trading it. Bishop f5 takes, and take again, b5. Knight d6 takes, and knight d2. Not letting him to play knight c4 whatsoever. Rook a3 is met by knight d2. Great position for white. Really lovely position. You can check it out. This is a game. White has grind the endgame. Dallas, the Queen's Gambit declined, guys. Any questions?
Can I get like paging of all these variations for creating a repertoire?
Look, your voice is really cannot hear it. So if you write down, I'll be happy.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
If he plays G7 اللي هو black plays G7 G6 sorry
Black.
G6
When G6, we have analyzed G6 right now.
Okay, if we eat the knight and then
Am I
E4,
audible
it's
now?
good. If we eat
What?
the knight, eat
You
the
mean-
knight, then
Am I audible?
You mean the 96, 97, 95?
no, I mean anything. If we eat the knight in E4, in E6, sorry, in F6.
We will look. We're gonna take on F6, and we're gonna take on F6 when when black plays knight F5, and that's the idea. There was
Okay,
other
then,
line
E4 isn't good at all.
E4. Oh, when after G6?
After we eat the knight on F6.
Okay, let's say 96. Let's say rook b1, 96, bishop h4, knight g7, b4, and you say knight f5 here. Bishop f6. Bishop, you mean e4 now, that just blunders a pawn. If you mean now, and
Okay,
black
so
suddenly better. Yeah, and e4s are not really good. Our main idea is b5. Those lines which we played e4, black had been really passive, but this time he's going to f5, so no. That's it. The
okay.
Queen's Gambit declined, guys. And one more line till we finish our course is the Queen's Gambit accepted. What if black accepts it? I'm gonna just play e3 here. Pretty simple. I have explained this. Yeah, knight f3 is my recommendation, but a3 is such a
Hello.
way more
Am I
simple
am
move.
I audible now?
I can hear your voice now.
Okay. So I was asking that if we can get the pigeon of all these variations.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I'll post.
Okay.
The owner will post it with
Okay.
the video.
Okay. Appreciate it.
No problem. So knight f3, well, is an idea. You can check it out. I'm just gonna play e3. Very simple, great line, positional, and it was really popular among Emmanuel last year and Alexander Alekhin. e3. If b5, that won't keep the pawn. We can play a4 and play queen f3, and that's a really famous position. Black's position is lost. The a8 rook is not going anywhere. If bishop e6, we can play knight f3, c6, knight c3, knight f6, knight g5, and we will hit the bishop. And that's a move that you will never face in a real game, guys. Like, trust me. But you can be prepared for it. So yeah, bishop is like, who on earth will play bishop e6 here just to be greedy and block his own bishop? Yeah. So
Okay.
knight f6.
Excuse me.
Yes.
After bishop e6, what if we play knight a3?
What if we play knight 3?
A3, A3, knight a3.
Knight a3, I think it's also good, but it allows black probably to play a6. And let's say we take on c4, he takes back, and maybe b5, knight e5. And here, white is better, of course. You can play this line too, but the advantage is more on the other line. I think knight a3 is actually an
What if
interesting
we
idea.
take first with knight? No, no. Oh, okay,
First
that's
take with
not a
the
good
knight.
move. No, that's not a good move. I
Well,
realized it.
I mean, the bishop is going to on d5 and can be annoying, but when we take with the bishop, it helps us develop. That's also better for white, like no problems at all, but yeah, you can play this too.
Okay.
So, but you will never face that move anyway. Knight f6, bishop c4, e6. g6 is, Grunfeld players will probably choose this. Former Grunfeld players, because if you were a Grunfeld player, they will have not played d5 anyway. Queen b3, e6, knight f3, bishop g7, castle. Queen a3 is an interesting idea, not letting black to castle. Castle, and knight c3, knight c6, bishop e2. The idea is to avoid knight f5. And black's bishop have some serious troubles. White is just better. e6, knight f3, a6, castle, b5, bishop d3, and bishop b7. Famous line. a4, b4, and knight bd2. The c4 square is an great outpost. c5, e4, cd4, e5, knight f7, knight c4, knight c6. We can play bishop g5, queen b8. We can play rook c1, h6, and play bishop f4. Great position for white. There's also c5 we have to check out. We can just castle. If takes, we're gonna take the e pawn. Knight c6, knight c3, bishop e7, rook e1, castle a3. That's, you gotta play an isolated pawn, but that's fine for white. Queen d3, bishop e7, bishop g5, rook c8, okay, d1, knight d5 we can take, and the isolated pawn is gone. Our main plan is to play d5, and once we get it, our position is better. Anyway, let's get to the main move here. which is c5. We're gonna play bishop c4, cd4, knight f3. Interesting idea. Queen c7. Well, after d3, what we're gonna play? Of course, it's a blunder. Very simple question.
Bishop takes f7.
Bishop takes f7. Yep, of course. And black is forced to resign. You're now up. Sorry. And we're winning. So not that. Queen c7, of course. We're gonna play bishop b3, ignoring the pawn. If knight f6, we can play ed4 and a better line of those isolated pawns for white, because the queen on c7 is misplaced. d3, bishop e3, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, castle e6, knight b5. Black is lacking development, and that pawn is not really worth it. We can't even take on f5 and have an equal game. But we, of course, want to win. Queen h4, knight f6, rook c1, queen g4. You're forced to trade now, but look, let's just compare the pieces' activities. What is this bishop? What is this rook? This king cannot castle. This rook will probably never get out. So, clearly better position for white. And here we have the move that you will face almost in all of your games. e5. Interesting idea. We cannot take, but black will be better after queen d1. So we're gonna take on c4, ed4, ed4. If knight f6, we can play queen b3. Interesting idea. Queen e7, we can play knight e2. If g6, we can play knight bc3, bishop g7, bishop g5. And we're way ahead on the development. So queen b4. We're gonna play knight c3, takes, and we like this endgame, of course, because that pawn is not a weakness, it's an advantage, as you can see. Really great pawn. That's a nice game played by Magnus Carlsen. You can check it out again. Let's just see the main move. Also, bishop d6 should be paid attention to. Knight f6, knight f3, knight f6, castle, h3, not letting it play bishop g4. h6, knight c3, knight c6. Yep. Queen c2. If a6, we can play a3. Bishop d7 and rook e1. Queen c8 and bishop h6. Maybe I should have let you guys think, but yeah. He cannot take. Why can't he take, guys? Can you tell me? Well, it's obvious. Let me just show you. Queen g6. This is a pin. And there's nothing that black can... Now bishop f5? It's white's turn.
No. Before. Yes, when? Yes. Take with bishop. Take with bishop. Your idea, bro. Take takes h6.
There. You mean
Takes.
here?
Yes.
And bishop f5. Yeah, I forgot. Sorry, guys. Yeah. We're gonna play queen d2. Queen d2. We want to recapture. Yes, gh6, queen h6. And after knight h7, we're gonna play knight e4, bringing the other knights. Queen d8, we're gonna play queen h5, leaving space and attacking the 5 pawn. Knight e7, knight h4. Great position for white. I think white is winning. Yeah. So let's just look at knight b4. That's the main move. Queen b1, c6, if bishop e6, that's just not cool. e6 is really bad. c6, bishop h6 again. Chess is so beautiful, isn't it? gh6, and we have queen g6. King h8, we can take, and king g8 is lost after knight e5. And white is completely winning here. Knight e7, we can play knight e4, threatening knight g5, bishop e7, knight e5, and queen d4, knight f7 takes, and queen e. Well, this is theory, believe it or not, but that's theory. And yeah, that was a nice game, played again by, I think, yeah, Magnus Carlsen versus Lee Kwang Lian. So yeah, that was the Queen's Gambit course, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. In the next part, we will look at the Slav And also, maybe if we get time, I'll make a poll if you guys want to fight against the King's Indian defense and the Benani